Hi everyone, I'm here to tell you about 5 gezellige Dutch things. But before I go into that, a little about me. I first got acquainted with the Netherlands about 4 years ago when I met my Dutch girlfriend when we were living back in the US. And, I've visited the Netherlands several times since then. And I liked it so much that last year I decided to permanently move here. And she was still back in the US. Now we live here together, but I liked it so much, I just thought, we're doing this, I'm moving, and here I am. And I've loved every minute of it since then. Maybe not every minute. Moving is hard, you guys. But I've loved a lot of my time here. So that's my story, and yeah, I thought I would make a video on 5 gezellige Dutch things because the Netherlands is very gezellig. For those of you who don't know, this very, very difficult to pronounce word is similar to the Danish Hygge, which I'm also probably butchering. But it basically just means cozy. It's not a perfect translation, but it means all cozy and nice things. It's like if Martha Stewart, without the whole jail stuff, was a word. That would be gezellig. That was a really bad example. But anyway, to the 5 things that I think is gezellig about living in the Netherlands. And the first one, I think no one would disagree with me. Never say never, right? Are the tons of cafes and terrasjes here in the Netherlands. And I really mean in every city, town, and of course, English speakers. The word terrasje essentially just means outdoor seating. So at a cafe or bar, if you want to sit outside, you're sitting at a terrasje. And it's just a nice word. It kind of sounds like terrace, gives it a nice European feel. It is Europe after all. So what is so gezellig about these terrasjes or cafes? I mean, you're outside. And coming from the US, so I lived all over the northeast of the US. So I can't speak for the West Coast or anything, but I've lived in cities like New York, DC, Philadelphia, and I visited all over. But cafes, we do have cafes. And first of all, they tend to be these big chains. We got a Starbucks on every block in New York. That's how it is. But when it comes to these cute little cafes, I have to say we're kind of behind. We're lacking. We don't understand the value of these tiny cute cafes. Or maybe we do and they just don't succeed in our capitalistic society. But yeah, the Netherlands, there are just tons of little cafes and you can sit outside and the weather is always, let's say in the summer it doesn't get too hot. So that's a great time to be sitting outside at these cafes, enjoying a little coffee or a beer, rosé, drink of your choice. And I absolutely love it. Whereas in the US, people like to sit inside. It's either too hot or too cold. And well, we like our AC in the summers. What can I say? Again, especially in the Northeast where it tends to get really hot. Whereas here, the Dutch have figured out a way around their really rainy, snowy, well, there's no snow, but their rainy, cold winters. And what they tend to do is, they really like their terrasjes. So in order to be able to sit outside, even when it's rainy, well, they've got tarps and space heaters, and it's absolutely, it kind of looks like a fairy tale. I'm not even exaggerating. Imagine sitting on these cobblestone streets, and all the Dutch people are out sitting at these cafes on these cobblestone streets outside, even in the winter where the lights are out and they're just all warm and they have a blanket at times. I know, they have a fucking blanket. Well, they have a blanket and they're sitting with a blanket and, wine and just having a nice time with their friends. This is something that I absolutely love about the Dutch. They just know how to have gezellig time always. Keep it gezellig. And you don't just have a gezellig time in the Netherlands, you have to say that it's gezellig. So, fun fact, if you're at a cafe or terrasje here in the Netherlands, be very Dutch and tell people you're having a gezellig time. Good luck with that. It's been 4 years and I'm still struggling to say that word. This brings me to point number 2, which is sitting in a park. So right now it is summer in the Netherlands. And even with COVID-19, the rules have laxed a little bit here. So sitting in a park, as long as you keep your distance, is something that's relatively okay. And because the weather has been so great here recently, guess what? All the Dutch people, the first thing they do is they go to a park. And parks here are not like the ones that I'm used to in the US. Like in the US, the parks are kind of, I loved living in the US, but the parks were, let's say, lacking in some ways. They were too small for the city, first of all, so it wasn't like there was a park in, for every neighborhood or something like that. It was sort of like the parks were few and far in between. And like New York, of course has Central Park, but I mean, it's a really big thing, and there's lots of outdoor space in the middle of the city, and that's why it's cool, but it's not pretty, it's not cute, it's not gezellig, to like be in a park with your friends. And going to the park was never a big thing. I mean, we would do barbecues at times, but not really a big thing. Whereas for Dutch people, if they're not at a cafe or terrasje when the weather is nice, they're at a park. And you know what they do? They go to the Albert Heijn, which is the grocery store here, and they find the best deal on cheese. They find the cheapest crackers. They find a good deal on wine and beer. Dutch people love a good deal. So they go to their Albert Heijn, pack up all their stuff. They grab a little kleedje with them, a blanket to bring to the park. They put it all on their bike. They go biking, and yes, this is how Dutch people bike, unless you're in Amsterdam where you're biking like this. Elsewhere you're biking like this. Whatever, you're biking upright, you're going to the park, and yeah, you just sit there with your friends and have an amazing time. You're most likely going to be next to a pond with a lot of ducks and other kinds of creatures, and it's those ducks are not afraid, man. They really just come right next to you. But I've had an amazing time. So Amsterdam famously has the Vondelpark, which technically het Vondelpark if you're speaking Dutch, but in English, the Vondelpark, which is really nice to go visit. My favorite in Amsterdam is Servati Park, but Dutch people, yes, they love their parks, and sitting outside is just a very gezellig thing. This brings me to point number 3. When you're at a park, Dutch people love to drink in parks. I'm not talking necessarily, teenagers. I'm talking about just adults sitting there having a picnic, and they have their bottle of rosé or beer, and you can buy special coolers just for this thing. Yeah, the Dutch have really figured this out. You just go to the Hema, which is Dutch version of Target. That's Target or TJ Maxx. So yeah, they just go to the Hema, buy a little cooler so that they can keep their drinks warm to drink in a park. And so in the US, we absolutely cannot drink in public. I mean, it's really a thing. It's kind of annoying when you're going to a concert or something that you can't just sit outside and have a drink. But here, no problem. The Dutchies want to keep it gezellig, so of course you can have your drink outside. Why would you not be able to do that? That's terrible. And again, I know this is popular in many places in Europe, but it's not true for every European city. So I've been to Barcelona, where you can't sit in a park and drink, probably because there are too many tourists. There are a lot of tourists in Amsterdam, but they don't care because the Dutch people want to keep it gezellig. We're going to sit outside and have our wine, have our beer, and it's going to be great. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And one of my favorite things actually is that if you go to a bar, and let's say you get a drink in a plastic cup, which happens sometimes. It doesn't often happen, but sometimes you get it in a plastic cup. And let's say your friends want to move somewhere else. Maybe you want to go to a park. You thought, man, I don't want to be at this bar. I want to go to a park. So you could just take your beer with you, go onto the street, and drink it on the streets. Imagine that. Mind-blowing. But it's because not only can you just drink in parks, you could just drink in public spaces in the Netherlands. So number 3, drinking in public spaces. You could just stand on the street, have your wine and beer, and drink. And I'm not talking, and I know for Americans, this might create a picture of like chaos and people, getting drunk and trash everywhere, but it's actually really not like that here. It's more that people just have a nice time wherever you go, because you always want to be having a gezellig time. If you're not having a gezellig time, what are you even doing with yourself? It's a day wasted if you did not have a gezellig time that day. It's always about keeping things gezellig. Well, So yeah, if you come to the Netherlands, do not be shy of taking your drink, going out to the streets, and well, drinking. Explore your freedom, Americans. Explore your freedom. Come here, grab your drinks, and go outside and drink. Dutch people, dear, dear Dutch people, thank you so much for allowing me the freedom to drink outside. I really admire, yeah, you're just free spirit. Have a drink. The only thing that I find pretty funny is that you can't be drunk and participate in traffic. Great rule. But a lot of Dutch people will, drink and get on their bikes and bike drunk. That's a fun fact. But you Dutch people, I love it that you can just drink in public. It's fine. And yeah, you could just have a nice time. So at parks or streets, and that way it's also easier to drink outside at a cafe because you're not, I think it makes it easier for, I don't know this for a fact, but I do know that sometimes there are laws around drinking, outside, even in a cafe area. So it's not really an issue here. Okay, this brings me to number 4, canals. So if you read my blog, Dutch Americano, you will know that I am obsessed with canals. I am so obsessed with canals. It's one of the reasons that I moved to the Netherlands. I'm shamelessly going to admit it to you. I didn't think I was that superficial. Turns out I am. Canals. I moved for the canals. I moved for love for canals. I cannot explain this to you. So you might be imagining the picturesque Amsterdam, with the canals everywhere, and that is so true. But there are also other cities in the Netherlands that also have canals. I mean, a lot of the country is like at sea level or below. So, canals are a really popular thing. And yeah, I love them. So you can find them in cities like Utrecht or Leiden. It's not just Amsterdam, but yes, in Amsterdam when I would visit, I just absolutely loved how beautiful the canals were. And so do the Dutch people. The Dutch people are going to be biking along their canals, and they love to boat on canals. That's right. Dutch people love to rent a boat. Many of them have a boat. Really weird. I'm not talking about like people in their mid-40s who, are at the peak of their careers. I'm talking about people out my age, like in their 20s, who just own a boat and they go out onto the canals. And yeah, they have a picnic on a boat with some drinks because you can do that. And yeah, have a party on the boat. You could even park your boat, when you ride your boat through the canals. And you could just dock it by a beer garden and have a beer in a beer garden on a canal. This is so amazing. And also the city looks absolutely fantastic, fabulous from the boat. Dutch people have really figured out how to do this. They thought, well, not only are we going to have canals, grachten in Nederlands. Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Took me so much time and I'm still struggling. But you could just get on a canal, which is practical, keeps the country from flooding. It's gorgeous as hell. And yeah, you could just take your boat on it and have a big party. It's great. So if you're visiting, I would recommend renting a boat because it's a little cheaper. But if you're going to do a boat canal, it's absolutely worth it. I just think the city looks amazing from a boat. And I've done it in Amsterdam and Utrecht. And it's amazing. Love the canals. So I talked about the boat, biking or walking along these canals, especially when the lights are out in the evenings. Oh, so romantic. And gezellig when you're with your friends on a boat or at a cafe or restaurant along those canals. I mean, you think the Dutch weren't going to figure that out and do that? Hell no. The Dutch knew what they were doing. They have all of these restaurants, bars, and cafes right on the canal. And you could just, you could visit, come sit there, enjoy. It's all very beautiful. And yes, if you were wondering, they're often on cobblestone streets. That's right. And you just have a gezellig time with your friends on a canal. Canals are gezellig. There, I said it. So I love canals. I could talk about canals together. Can make a separate video just on canals, a video series. But anyway, Dutch people, your grachten, amazing. And finally, number 5. Now this is a bit of a weird one in my list, but it's so, to me, it's very Dutch. So I'm going to say it. It's designated spaces for your laptops at cafes. Gonna give you a moment to think about that there. Because I know it's weird to kind of have a designated space for your laptop at a cafe for an American. Like I, in the US, would just work from cafes all the time. I would just, take my laptop, go to a cafe, and expect that I could just sit there and work. So this might seem like a very ungezellig thing that you can't just go there and use your laptops, but that's not how the Dutch work. The Dutch view laptops as being very ongezellig, not gezellig, not nice, not cozy, not interacting socially. Because, think about it. When you're sitting at a cafe on your laptop, it's like you're there for 3 or 4 hours. You're not talking to anybody. You're not really adding anything to the vibe of the cafe in a good way. You might be like adding your work vibes. And that's greater to Starbucks. But in most Dutch cafes, especially smaller ones, you will have a table or a few tables that are designated for laptop use. But other than that, a large part of the cafe will be just meant for people to sit and talk. How old school and amazing is that? Like I thought that was, so I'm not going to beat around the bush. I thought that was really crappy at first. I was like, I need to use my laptop because I am in the 21st century. But then as I would use my laptops at these cafes, I really saw these Dutch people having an amazing time. And this was when I would visit. So I would see them having the best time ever, talking to each other, and it really created a very nice vibe around me. And I also think it led to this kind of like low stress environment where if you want to go to a cafe, you don't have to worry about people taking up tables for hours and hours on their laptops, because that's, if you're going there to meet up with somebody, you're there for an hour or two max, and then you leave and the next person comes in. So I think it just doesn't add to that stress, which I also think makes it very gezellig if you could just go there with a friend and talk. But I think the Dutch have figured this out. They know how to maintain their gezellige culture. And you could just go in and have a coffee and talk to people. I mean, it's really crazy. That said, they are certain cafes where you can go to just work anywhere. So there's a coffee company, which is, it's spelled coffee company, but that's not the way to pronounce it. It's the coffee company. I know, it sounds really fake, but that's true. Take my word for it. And yeah, you could go to Bagels and Beans and work on your laptop there. It's all fine. So there are definitely places where you could do that. But generally speaking, at these small, cute places, it's all about interacting with people, your friends, and yeah, keeping it gezellig. So those were my 5 things about, the gezellige dingen in Nederland. And I'm curious if you guys have anything you would like to add here.